Hi everyone. Lovely to see you. I have something to read to you now. This time it is not my own, and most likely all the better for it. Um, and just bear with me while I screen share. There we go. I thought I would read to you The Coming of Lucifer, A Dream of Progress by X. Now, you may have, obviously you know of the letter X, but you may have noticed that it sort of has proliferated lately. I kind of associate X with, you know, the cancelling out of something, the sort of eradication of perceived error. So I don't know what you associate it with, but there you go. And one wonders what Elon Musk associates it with. And I wondered whether Elon Musk associated it with this particular poem, which is actually beautifully crafted. And I wanted to read it to you for that reason. I also wanted to read it to you in memory of the over 100,000 British people who have died of cardiovascular incidents above and beyond the number that would have been expected prior to 2020. Um, we can only we can only guess what might have happened in 2020 to cause the cardiovascular issues that people were having, that had been going into decline every year previously up to that point for decades, to suddenly start, the trend to be completely reversed, and for that would be around about 117 jumbo jets of our largest jumbo jets spontaneously combusting in the air. That's what that's what 100,000 deaths looks like. And I mean, imagine if you did look up and those jets did actually explode in front of you. Could you ignore it then? I don't know. Could people ignore what was going on in the skies above them? Perhaps. Um, okay, right. So this is The Coming of Lucifer, and it's A Dream of Progress by X. I tried to find out who X was, and I failed. Now I'm just going to pause it, and you can make your own mind up. But for me, X is a British public school boy. Um, and he has probably had something to do with the Fabian Society at some point. The book itself, the hard copy of the book, is in Australia. So I think it'd be a really interesting story about how the book got from where it was published in the UK to Australia. Um, the What I was able to do was find out that the publishers were not referred to as this triple-barreled name before 1875. So there's a window between when the publishers became Hazel, Viney, and let me find it. Where are they? Oh, hold on a moment. There you go. Oh no, not quite. It's frustrating. There you go. Made and printed in Great Britain by Hazel, Watson and Viney Limited. Now, they weren't that triple-barreled name until 1875. And there is now, over here, there's an inscription, and it says RC Statter, Wallesley, December 1929. Now, in Australia, in their records in the library, they say that this was published in 1929. I'm not sure how they can be absolutely certain of that. Perhaps they have access to information that I don't. From the book itself, all you can really determine is that somebody was gifted it or bought it in 1929, which means it must have been published either then or before then. So there's a 54-year window, as far as I'm concerned, where it could have been published. The Australian Library have it down wrong. It's not, they've written that it's Wallison. It looks like it. And if you didn't live in the UK, it's a perfectly legitimate mistake to make. But it's actually Wallasey. And if you put in RC Statter Wallasey into a search engine, you can find out that he was involved in buying a girls, no, running a girls' school in Wallasey, which is an area in the UK. And that kind of makes sense of, somebody who would be buying books. You can understand somebody interested in education might be somebody who was purchasing books. So The Coming of Lucifer. Here we go. A Dream of Progress by X. The Coming of Lucifer. At sunrise in the land of Ing, great Lucifer was born, while grinning demons dipped to greet the high auspicious morn, and ushered down the strong young soul from limbo safe set free, to start and order in the flesh the evil days to be. Ing, you may guess, was England once, but most enlightened nations, after the war, began to scrap their die-hard designations. This was the brand new Commonwealth, fresh named and up-to-dated, some orators and literary gents had just created. And now it really seemed high time some prophet came to birth, to match a fitting heaven to a reconstructed earth. The old theology was dead, so Mr. Bliffen said, the little man who wrote those books so many people read. They told you all you need to learn for quite a modest sum, God's universe or mine, and man, past, present, and to come. They showed how life and all began, how life and all must end, as Bliffen somehow seemed to know, and things appeared to tend. Viewing the pygmies of the past, the giants of today, they showed how art and mind have marched upon an upward way, how Bliffen grew from Socrates by evolution's law, and Shakespeare's immature conceits are perfected in Pshaw. With churches and with creeds it dealt in quite a startling way, for none of them were worth a rap, so Bliffen seemed to say. In fact, of man's religious faith, as mass hallucination, he furnished quite a brief but most exhaustive explanation. Since superstition first arose mid anthropoid arboreans, till Christianity collapsed and died with the Victorians. But since for such exploded myths he kept a kind of pity, he showed how Providence might still survive as a committee, a sort of self-determined representative affair, composed of highbrows live and dead, with Bliffen in the chair. But though this creed might seem to meet all rational aspirations, it scarce seemed fitted yet to oust the older revelations. So at this crucial time the world was well prepared to hear some clear celestial message from some live, authentic seer. His life's inception shadowed forth the fell design in view. His birth and breeding suited well the work he had to do. His earthly parents loved and lived from stale conventions freed, and preached and practiced day by day the pure progressive creed. Both were divorced, yet loth to wed, for each was wont to say, some more congenial comrade still may chance to come my way. One day the she-progressive squirmed and shouted, oh, my hat! Then to her mate laughed loud and long, it seems there'll be a brat. Of course I wanted no such thing, this one or any other, and read with care your birthday gift, how not to be a mother. But since the accidents occurred, perchance this precious son, I guess 'twill be a boy, may prove the long-expected one. The hope and promise of the world, predestined soon to show this eager questing age the way it really ought to go. Now just about this very time it chanced that freakish fate, with rank and fortune both endowed, her communistic mate. An uncle rich and right, of noble name though not descent, catching a chill was summoned hence, and much protesting went. So comrade Binks, although he swore 'twas much against his will, became a millionaire, and eke Lord Brokerage to bill. My uncle's wealth was fairly won, it had no feudal taint. His peerage generously earned, excited no complaint. No tyranny of the soil was he, no tyrant of the soil was he, but massed his modest pile, besting his fellow men by frank finesse and honest guile. So in our fervent land campaign, we have no cause to slack. 'Tis other people's land on which we wish the people's back. As to our own, 'twere envy past all reasonable bounds to grudge us premium villa with its ornamental grounds. But now, old thing, reviewing all these new considerations, think you 'tis time to readjust our marital relations? To be a peeress? Poof! She cried. That cuts no ice with me. Yet some absurd prestige still clings to dames of high degree. Some silly social stigma still condemns unwedded bliss. We two had better couple up. It really comes to this. And since to social climbing snobs it pays our cause to pander, a titled goose shall now attend a titled propaganda. So in some free and funny church, with morals up to date, they found a pastor quite prepared to bless their happy state. They heard his genial sermon once, 'twas broad as broad could be, and seemed to meet their views so well, they asked him round to tea. Divorced and live in sin? Tut, tut. Well, well, I'll fix you fast. But understand this little lapse must really be the last. That marriage laws should be relaxed claims fair consideration, but still my little flock must do these things in moderation. And so the rites were said, and so was born this child of grace, a little earlier, it's true, than usually the case. And now the kindly padre cried, my church's right I claim, this precious pledge of hallowed love to consecrate and name. The mother cried, if you insist, baptized the kid shall be. So bless and sprinkle as you will, but pray don't sprinkle me. We mean to call him Lucifer, bright word of hopeful omen, despite the prejudicial cant that clings to that cognomen. And we'll take it as a favour if, in compliment to you, your honoured name of Pifflejaw you'll kindly give him too. And so the fateful child, thus bred, thus named, for good or bad, was launched upon his life and grew a likely little lad. And much his parents pondered ere his boyhood reached maturity, how best to train this pioneer of perfected futurity. With Mr. himself discussed the best scholastic plan, while Mr. a moment spared from recreating man. Which public school? Why, none at all. They both appeared annoyed. To teach him loyalties quite effete, and values vain and void, old manners and old morals based on obsolete tradition, and traces he might never lose of Christian superstition. They named a noted school instead on novel lines conducted, where all the best progressive youth could fitly be instructed, where boys and girls were trained alike to fit the future polity, with certain wise adjustments made to hasten sex equality. The pupils all were neatly clad in skirts and Eton jackets, and all the boys did crochet work, and all the girls played rackets. With epicene insouciance they mixed in work and play, and man is woman, woman man, their teachers made them say. For Dr. Coué bade them hope that should they persevere, all outward differences in time would surely disappear. The virile virtues cease to deck the tame, perfected new man. Gentleness, modesty, and grace be laughed away from woman, till man at last be man no more, discarding masculinity, and feminists achieve their aim by stamping out femininity. There send your boy, unless meantime the timorous old foundations should have the pluck to put in force the newer sex relations. Wickham and Winchester revise their viewpoint fixed and narrow. Rodian set up a house for boys, and girls be sent to Harrow. No patriotic cant he'll learn, no monarchist appeals, no militarist talk to taint his pacifist ideals. No Puritan restraints shall curb his ego's free volition, no state religiosity impose its inhibition. Some bright, sophisticated maid his chosen pal shall be. No reticence or shame shall cloak their converse frank and free, glad to exchange their fresh young minds, made prematurely wise, on every topic once tabooed, disdaining all disguise. There, in due course, young Binks was sent, and won such approbation, his parents viewed his future course with glad anticipation, till something happened at the school I'd rather not discuss, stirring what stout progressives call a quite unneeded fuss. To hostile prejudice, be sure it gave a welcome handle, and caused what old world prigs and moral diehards call a scandal. And all because some fresh young souls precociously made good some of the pioneer ideas for which their elders stood, and crossing T's and dotting I's with innocent intention, moved just a little in advance of ethical convention. After a decent interval, his reputation cleared. At Camford University, young hopeful next appeared. He scorned the set scholastic quest for knowledge not worth knowing, yet shunned alike such vain pursuits as sports or games or rowing. His intimates were such as scoffed at all life's common rules, called highbrows by the vulgar herd, aesthetes or bloody fools. Tradition's dilettante foes, rebellion's mild uprousers, with thoughts dishevelled as their hair, discursive as their trousers. Just what they meant you never knew, or what they would be at, though like Chesterton and water flowed their silly stream of silly chat. The only certain thing in life is what it hasn't got, and nothing really is except the something that is not. All codes of conduct they condemned as cramping limitations, since to fulfill their precious selves embraced all obligations. And Lucifer, who inly laughed, like any Philistine, yet shrewdly sensed in all this trash some kindred thing malign. But soon that fateful chance occurred, since now the time was rife, which first revealed to himself, transforming all his life. He met a psychic friend one day who asked him to a sitting to meet some disembodied souls from somewhere earthward flitting, opening up an introduction to a most intriguing set who proffered an adventure that he hadn't sampled yet. Their shining light or chief control, a kind of spectral crony, through whom the human medium worked, was called Old Man Benoni. He dwelt in Sidon long ago and practiced as a seer, but practiced now in Camford or in limbo somewhere near. Despite his high celestial rank, he was a gamesome sprite. To toss the household goods about was ever his delight. He turned the tables, twirled the chairs, or gave your hair a twist, and dealt you playful punches with his ectoplastic fist. From what he told of life beyond, it seemed a pleasant state, with pastimes suitable for all, from saint to reprobate, leaving to each aspiring soul whose earthly course was run, none of the fetters of the flesh, but nearly all the fun. In God's revolving scheme of things, the new is ever old, each fresh conceit some half-forgotten tale already told. So forward went this last advance on orthodox theology, back to the Witch of Endor and her primitive necrology. No vulgar dupes were those who now raked up these ancient rites, whereby mankind essayed long since to scale forbidden heights. But physicists of good repute and thinkers of renown tried hopefully to lift us up by dragging spirits down. And disabused materialists amazed somehow to find that matter more and more eludes the scientific mind, that something still transcends the final atom when you've caught him, and Bishop Berkeley wasn't quite the fool old Johnson thought him. To find there really was a soul upset these worthies sore, a thing most men and women and all children knew before, and made them disregard with scorn the church's sapient ruling that banned for reasons good and sound this necromantic fooling. Now, when young Binks with careless mien approached the psychic sphere, a wild commotion seized the sprites who thronged from far and near. A blast came howling through the room, the raps came loud and faster, voicing some sinister acclaim that hailed him lord and master. Benoni, looming through the dark, crawled up and bowed the knee, as to some high and kingly sprite of paramount degree. And he, scarce knowing what he said in this revealing hour, began to gibber in response with words of evil power. This broke the circle for the night and proved its final ending, for all got wondering where they were and whither things were tending, and to sum the situation up, began to ponder well if their easy quest of heaven hadn't landed them in hell. But Binks, henceforth aware of whence and wherefore he was sent, got more and more to know himself and what his mission meant, practised in secret magic gifts which servient spirits gave him, and nursed his plan to ruin man, ostensibly to save him. But when the hour drew nigh to make his fateful revelation, a baffling languor clogged his soul, a crippling hesitation. All down the ages through his flesh a warning message came, and softly through the heavenly spheres some angel breathed the same. There is a sweet shire nestling in the west, where England still is England at her best, with dark wild woods and lonely haunted downs, and dreaming pastures green, and old quiet towns, serenely rustical, that make her their pride, to match nor not mar the circling countryside, and where the land shelves snugly to the sea, with peaceful clash they mingle and agree. On no fierce rocks, no boastful billows roar, and storms break gently on the yielding shore. Here in a placid grange, cawed round by rooks, left to himself, to nature, and to books, where seeing naught, he had a vague impression that phantoms of the past kept quiet possession, that rustling dames and courtly fops and fogies disdained and bade begone his blatant bogies. The prophet, in a mild and chastened mood, sojourned one summer for his sad soul's good. Tired of life's turmoil, sick and soured was he, doubtful of all he was or was to be, and longed to brood oblivious in his cell, till some renewed incentive broke the spell. On green lawns prone he lounged alone, or strolled by mossy ways, fringed with dark yew, where loomed in view some flower-besprinkled maze. And on his sleep, so calm and deep, the moon shed magic rays, till over the hills, with gladdening thrills, there dawned enchanted days. At times, in meditative strain, he paced a silent strand, save by one hidden path he knew, secluded from the land, where intimate eternal seas, on lonely beaches breaking, sounded some secret to his soul, transcendent thoughts awaking. One lustrous morn, some impulse strong and strange stirred him betimes to meet some fateful change, to carry on awake, it so did seem, the wondrous course of some unfinished dream. He rose half dazed, then dressed and crept downstairs to breathe with zest the pure and early airs, with not a ghost of doubt where he must be, swiftly at sunrise by the shimmering sea. There he stood till at some nearing sound, like footsteps on the sand, he turned him round. Then with one glance, half rapture and half awe, oh, what a vision it was that he saw! His heart's ideal in living features drawn, his unknown dream embodied at the dawn. Eve's very type, and Holy Mary's too, fit soulmate for some Christian knight to woo. Lovely and wholesome, sane and sweet she stood, a woman unashamed of womanhood, sure of herself, ignoring every plan to sink her sex and start burlesquing man, but walked her own appointed ways aright, softness her strength, and modesty her might. He bowed and passed her by, but from that hour his spirit owned this maid's supernal power, stirred by her speech, so simple yet so wise, thrilled by each glance from those entreating eyes. Old loyalties and old reverences rose, sublimely wakened from their long repose, and by this earthly angel called him back to set his feet on some cerulean track, but not the one, of this he had no doubt, on which the world just then was setting out. And so upon that self-same shore, full soon there came a day, when walking wildly to and fro, he forced himself to say, by all the spirits of the pit, by all the powers of hell, by all I am and am to be, this love I cannot quell. By God, if he will hear my prayer, and this one boon is given, her hand shall lead me where she will, even if it leads to heaven. With cloudy rack the sky grew black, a wailing wind was heard, the lightning flashed, the thunder crashed, the slumbering ocean stirred. His guardian demons shrieked aloud and hovered round his track. The seabirds scattered far and wide and never more came back. When all grew clear, as in a flash, his dazzled gaze espied a nymph, but not the one he sought, all smiling at his side. He knew, full sure, this siren's lure, she'd singed his wings before, and he, poor fool, had vowed to risk her ravishments no more. For though she scorned each charm and grace that make for woman's worth, in form and face was Aphrodite's self come back to earth. You shan't be hers, I tell you straight, I want you for myself. I'm rich, and freely you shall spend my dower of paltry pelf. You've got ideas, and so have I. We'll work them out together. We'll mount this mad, careering world and ride it hell for leather. That chaste Madonna, let her go. I know those virgin saints, in tiresome reticences wrapped and hindering restraints. Wife or no wife, take me at once. I'm yours from A to Z. Nor need to wait till by some priest some mumbo-jumbo said. Sorry, A to Z. Some mumbo-jumbo said. 'Tis sex impels and nature calls, and neither need appall. While as for shame, oh, that be damned, we women now know all. I've said my say, 'tis you to play. Hot kisses closed her lips, and Circe's victim then and there had fairly burned his ships. 'Twas after this, his nascent fame, grown big throughout the land, he laughed to find about his path a fast increasing band of cranks and faddists, long-haired men and crop-haired women all, acclaiming with consentient voice their prophet's sacred call. His blatant mistress bored him stiff, and gladly he'd have shed her, but wanting money for the cause, he deemed it best to wed her. And there were others came and went, his partners, by the way, his soul companions, spirit brides, who seldom said him nay. But these were secret ties of love from vulgar fame concealed, until the new conceit of sex was ripe to be revealed. In all he did, in all he taught, he kept this aim in sight, to get the deeds of darkness done, disguised as works of light. He spread his poison, slow and sure, through many a specious sect, and made the evil seem good, bamboozling God's elect. The cult of Mammon thrived anew as quite a Christian creed, and social service formed the mask for envy, hate, and greed. Till with the Sermon on the Mount he made it quite agree to help the poor to rob the rich and curse their charity. He set the pacifists to work and got the church abetting. I came to bring a sword, not peace, conveniently forgetting. The strong man armed must arm no more, since strife should not occur. Not righteous self-defense, nay, peace. Oh, peace, cried Lucifer. 'Twas backward Christian soldiers now, and throw your arms away. Fools die, but wise men live, though not to fight another day. In every sphere of life and thought, he let the notion gender that worth and merit now consist in cowardice and surrender, till all who cherished fixed beliefs and held them with decision were dubbed as diehards, not in praise, but frankly in derision. Yet all the time he prompted those who stirred up civic strife, with death to all who dared to doubt some crazed new scheme of life, and got this doctrine kept alive with bomb and gun and sabre. 'Tis wrong to kill your country's foes, but right to kill your neighbour. And tongue in cheek he kept through all this purpose sly and steady, that while the powers of good disarmed, the hosts of hell stood ready. Art, with a great big A, obeyed his sinister obsession. No one, he taught, should dare to daunt its adequate expression. Each genuine aesthetic urge must have unbridled play, and art for art's sake seek and find its own uncharted way. He saw how art regarded thus, immune to good or evil, conveniently might come to mean just art to serve the devil. And soon its craftsmen, one and all, while vaunting versatility, got harping on one nauseous note with ominous docility. And while they claimed to treat life, and when they claimed to treat of life in every phase or kind, 'twas 10 to 1 you guessed at once which phase they had in mind. A daring book was one that dared be everything but clean, and literary license meant the right to be obscene. And soon amongst artistic folk a cognate notion spread that put them on the downward path he wished mankind to tread. In execution, as in aim, they flouted all convention, and making anarchy the mode, they helped his fell intention. By ridiculing stale technique and damning trite formality, they subtly made subversive art serve decadent morality. Each latest post-impressionist his pioneers outran, till all fell back in style and scope to mimic tribal man. Crude daubs that cavemen would have scorned, yet fools conspired to praise. Rude verse, less rhythmic, more uncouth than pristine bardic ways. Chipped chunks of marble or of stone that got the public guessing, set forth the neoplastic school and earned the critic's blessing, while the very newest music could be reproduced at need just by banging on a tom-tom or by tootling on a reed. But perhaps the most enlightening of these cultural advances was the pleasing evolution of the fashionable dances. On from the stately minuet and courtly gay gavotte to the graceful possum wriggle and the chaste gorilla trot. Dignity, reverence, self-restraint, and all the high emotions, 'twas Lucifer who made them rank as antiquated notions. He cast his eye around the press and shrewdly singled out some zany from whose pen flowed ink like water from a spout. Then in his ass's ears, pricked up to catch each parrot cry, whispered the word Victorian and stood complacent by. It flew around till one and all, repeating it with zest, the silly shibboleth was made a standard and a test. For everything thus dated back, no matter what its worth, was marked henceforth with one consent for mockery and mirth. Each sterner merit once extolled, and each endearing grace, they complimented with a grin and praised with a grimace. They dubbed right conduct dowdy, called good manners quaint antiques, and all the virtues of the past just resurrected freaks, made modesty a mincing minx grotesque in garb and gait, and chastity a comic frump, absurdly out of date. And clear through this decisive cant, the master thought persisted, that change is always for the best and must not be resisted, that progress means just moving on, no matter whence or where, and so the faster you progress, the sooner you get there. Pessimists admit, they said, and preachers of reaction, that man's material advance gives cause for satisfaction, since year by year and more with gadgets and devices, life grows mechanically equipped. Agreed, if that suffices. And of this bright millennial trend, here's one proof out of many, that Bliffen owned 2 motor cars, while Plato hadn't any. Now this Victorian stunt so took by storm the public mind, that Lucifer resolved to try some others of the kind, and mobilized the class he dubbed in secret ridicule the fool intelligentsia as his most convenient tool. These highbrows talked, Lord, how they talked, and spouted ink in oceans, with scarce a hint of truth or sense in all their windy notions. They never paused for serious thought in either great or small things, but learned by rote a casual, crammed up ignorance of all things. And since the world in which they moved was not of facts but phrases, you needed but some verbal trick to tickle them to blazes. The cant of cults and complexes proclaimed you in the know. You called a lie vertical and made it sure to go. Vertical, and made it sure to go. You voiced a novel viewpoint and you got them all agog. You talked of values reassessed and scrapped the decalogue. You indicated angles and you emphasized appeals, and all the blithering brotherhood came bleating at your heels. You named a pact to banish war and got them all applauding, then brought your army up to strength and built a fleet according. If you shouted out a slogan, they chortled with delight. If you called a thing tendinous, it was certain to be right. Or trotting out the master word that never failed to tell, you hailed them with a gesture and they followed you to hell. In all this gush they quite ignored two virtues plump and plain, our fathers doggedly upheld, our sons might learn again. The homely knack of holding back when mischief leads the way, the simple pluck of shouting no when fools are yelping yea. To all the cures by quacks prescribed to heal an ailing nation, these dupes gave free or forced assent, but never blunt negation. 'Twas modern life will have it so, and better try it out. And things appear to shape that way, and only diehards doubt. So on they went with bland content, till on some vexing day, when failure stared them in the face, they looked the other way. So may you guide a heedless world, regardless where it goes. So may you lead a donkey with a carrot at its nose. With all this crazed mentality, no wonder that you saw some very queer developments in equity and law. And here the prophet took a hand and played an easy role, inciting two conflicting fads that sought to get control. For serious crime, there came to grow a mild commiseration, and even the worst offender earned a tender condemnation. The murderer kills because he must, 'tis impulse moves his hand. For what he does amiss, blame not his conduct, but his glands. Of punishment, pray speak no more, nor hint of retribution. What's needed here is treatment in some kindly institution. That theft is kleptomania, all the wise have long suspected, and burglary is just adventurous ardor misdirected. The bigamist is one who gives free play to natural forces, and if you bar two wives at once, get on with quick divorces. Fraud may be unrequited love, so Dr. Freud surmises, and forgery may yet be cured with Swedish exercises. Arson's an atavistic urge made dangerous by repression, embezzlement, some psychomathematical obsession, while many common crimes suggest infective germination, and all may haply yield in time to prompt inoculation. But though the pains and penalties of crime grew thus abated, a vast and complex code of new offences got created, and every act of social life, of work or recreation, passed under government control or local regulation. If, wanting to complete your job, you failed to watch the clock and passed the statutory time, you found yourself in dock. For betting after breakfast, policemen ran you in, and to smoke without a license became a deadly sin, and to cut your hair on Tuesday, or to whistle in the park, drink milk without a bun, or eat a chocolate after dark. Caught in the act, although for all his guilty hangdog look, that handcuffed rogue they're hustling off scarce strikes you as a crook. Yet to some evil course it seems incurably addicted. An old offender, so they say, thrice previously convicted. You ask a constable his crime, he says, to be exact, it's section 4 of clause 14, the Path and Pavement Act, walking beyond the legal pace with reckless oversight. He passed that witness on the left. It should have been the right. Hurried and absent-minded, and in fact he quite forgot. But that won't help him with the beak. He's safe to get it hot. And so, twixt right and wrong, men's wits got thoroughly bemused, with conscience and legality conflicting and confused. And citizens, both good and bad, were in the end persuaded that law and order were a farce, just meant to be evaded. With this result, I need not say our prophet was delighted, it being just the frame of mind his prompting had invited, and led the world by easy steps, this line of thought pursuing, to the universal anarchy designed for its undoing. But though the people fretted sore and called the law a hass, the highbrows tried persuading them to love it in the mass, get a social satisfaction from each bureaucratic measure, and through personal discomfort gain cooperative pleasure. For human pleasure, all agreed, was life's one end and aim, the only practical ideal, yet each must have the same. And the function of a ruler really finishes and starts in dealing out enjoyment in exactly equal parts. And since merit's grown invidious and success and usurpation, each must carry on contented his appointed avocation, thrift and diligence as selfish predilections now regarded, and toil itself an evil that may someday be discarded, till work for all means work for none, with pay for young and old, and life one grand collective loaf, officially controlled. Now what on earth or somewhere else comes here to intervene? This tiresome visionary trash that seems to blur the scene, this ghostly pomp of futile men and things that once have been, passing across my gaze like mystic movies on the screen. The past is dead and done, but though no doubt it counts for naught, I can't forget that someone once conceived this silly thought. The present dies as soon as born, we guess the future set, long since in some celestial plan, but scarce a glimpse we get. The past alone is firm and fixed and lives immutably, the only part we really know of God's eternity. Be that as it may, it seems today I'm interrupted here to watch these pale persistences inaptly reappear. And far adown the vanished years, at first I have to look, while once again young David takes his pebble from the brook. Brave innocence, untaught to fear the childish notion vain, that simply thus, if you have faith, are grim Goliath slain. Why do these Spartan dead loom up from lost Thermopylae, smiling triumphant in defeat, for every coward to see? Must be Thermopylae. And when reckless Curtius ceased to leap into his pit, determined thus to do, or rather more than do, his bit. Here sits a king, it looks like Alfred laying down his laws, or listening while some liegeman pleads some long-forgotten cause. Here sits such virtue, valour, wisdom, majesty innate, that though he ruled so mean a realm, we call him still the Great. I see the sun glint of the east on English armour shine. 'Tis Richard, lion-hearted, takes the field in Palestine. A kindred host across the years comes clashing in to meet him, as Allenby's victorious squadrons gallop up to greet him. See Moore step blithely to the block and Ridley to the stake, with faith and doctrines poles apart, at one for conscience' sake. And not with all the world and all its glory might you try to tempt them for 1 hour of life they could not justify. Montrose is moving to his doom, the rebel rabble roar, still by one grave majestic glance sinks shamed for evermore. Owning of all that wrought and fought at that tempestuous tide, No kingly soul more nobly lived or more supremely died. Some unknown knight fares forth to try some desperate daring do. You know the end full well, and guess that all the time he knew. Not hope, but honour heartens him, and what sustains him best is the aim and the adventure and the splendour of the quest. Here's Wallace, here would the wake, the holy maid, until, egged on by narrow impulses, we moderns learn to quell, each heading what we now should call a patriotic faction, provoking, prepared to do or die for an abstraction. But look, our Nelson breathes again, his last victorious sigh, his work well done, his fame well won, and all his cares put by. Of all the loved and glorious things on which his soul was bent, his life held so much, yet death held more, and beckoned him content. The Iron Duke sits at his gate, from riding through the town. A murderous mob is on his track, he stares them up and down, with stern and steadfast gaze, and then, dismounting full in view, says merely this, odd day to choose, the day of Waterloo. Heroic Gordon stands serene, yet conscious of his doom, to watch his life's last sunrise gild the ramparts of Khartoum. And who would barter smug success and drab prosperity for bright immortal failures such as this by such as he? And now I have to wait and watch across the picture when a vast procession of the dead that seems to have no end. I ponder still on what it meant, that mournful muffled cry. Was it for this? Was it for this you sent us forth to die? But here the prophet's voice broke in, that most unhappy war that never hadn't ought to be and mustn't any more. Of king and country, faith and truth, and such like sad appeals, let the dead prate, they leave us cold with our revised ideals. And now with gusto I resume the interrupted tale, how Lucifer contrived to make his secret will prevail. The politicians, truth to tell, he largely left alone, since every noxious thing he preached they practiced on their own. The people's rule of by and for, you'll judge with what sincerity these gentry had proclaimed long since a self-sufficient verity, which came to mean in sober fact, although this sounded odd, the voice of folly is and shall be called the voice of God. But when they stressed the people's will, the people's this and that, infallibly you always guessed the game that they were at. And should the people turn them down by some perverse majority, they said at once the hostile vote possessed no real authority. In one respect, I must admit, had public life grown cleaner, no candidate now dare assume the old corrupt demeanor. To bribe the voter was a crime, unless, and this seemed funny, you offered frankly not your own, but other people's money. Taxation as the commons' gift, a kind of willing toll, was like sour apples in the mouths that clamoured for a dole. So give them this refreshing fruit, far richer, rarer, riper, that only those shall call the tune who cannot pay the piper. Ninepence for fourpence, glorious words, O eloquence sublime! What nobler call has stirred the soul in all recorded time? Ninepence for fourpence, Burke and Pitt in vain had dire to vie, in all their most exalted flights, with this uplifting cry. But when this clarion appeal had won its due acclaim, they found they had to carry on with others much the same. For a legislative bonus, it's a most distressing fact, has no electoral value once it's turned into an act. In reaping base ingratitude, they faced the common lot, and thanks for favours still to come were all the thanks they got. So mindful of the Latin tag, bis dat qui cito dat, they conjured forth new promises like rabbits from a hat. And each one struggling for the lead along these generous courses, competed who could squander most of taxable resources. Their power thus won, these supermen with plausible intentions embarked on superpolitics of grandiose dimensions. With superminds no longer cramped by patriotic fictions, they planned a superstate to fit their super predilections. To all the international cranks resigned decisive sway, broke Britain up and flung her worldwide heritage away. Freed from all base imperial ties and retrograde alliances, the sundered realm was free to form cosmopolitan affiances. Though Wales became autonomized and Scotland separated, where on earth is that Rhea got intimately mated? With Turalura Uralan found new preoccupations, and other nice impromptu states met at the League of Nations, and to show her bona fides and to leave no lingering doubt that the motto, think imperially, was really down and out, gave international status to the Commonwealth of Malta, and with Bokovic shared a mandate for Gibraltar. A hidden hint it surely was, sent by our arch deceiver, that wrecked our solid national house for castles in Geneva. And 'twas he that looked on laughing, while our governmental asses chased false and flickering ideals through doctrinary morasses. And instead of sitting tight at home to manage our affairs, with other self-determined folk left free to manage theirs, on these polyglot excursions must perpetually skedaddle with Dr. Watsnamsky and Professor Fiddle Faddle, who to build a world dominion still fatuously tried, without the aid of arms, and half the world well armed outside. Now when these super statesmen from such super occupations had leisure to attend to more domestic avocations, whichever party held the reins grew conscious every day of a harassing discovery that filled them with dismay. In their program of destruction, they were fearful that of late they had used the Constitution up at far too quick a rate. And as for food abolition, it was clear beyond a doubt that our ancient ordered polity showed signs of giving out. Since with the men of 32 the sage Macaulay stood, looked on the world the Whigs had made, and saw that it was good, their scheme of chartered freedom grew successively improved to a legalized mobcracy with every check removed. But spite of all, there came at last the fatalistic notion to crown the work of ruin by one last subversive motion. It had long been sadly pondered by the saner folk in Ing that politicians' honour is the undiscovered thing, that from skill in turning phrases comes a skill in turning coats, and that what he calls his principles are baits for catching votes, that a violent innovator of the most destructive school will let things be for quite a while if once you let him rule. And this maxim proved its verity in many a fateful hour. If you want a revolution, put the Tories into power. Pledged to oppose and bound by every promise to resist it. Well, here I stress a vital point in case you may have missed it. They said of each successive change, however they might rue it, it will never do to wait and let the other fellows do it. And this reminds me of a craze that now possessed the nation, foreshadowed to our prophet in his early education, which the politicians touched upon most gingerly at first, all careful to commit themselves no further than they durst. Since Adam dwelt in paradise and Eve abode beside him, the right of man to rule the roost had never been denied him, though this important saving clause had always rested true, that Eve, not always with success, might tell him what to do. When Christian marriage supervened, the veriest fool could see that in a parliament of two there's no majority, and the common sense solution preached by Peter and by Paul, that one must rule and one obey, was ratified by all. So man in council and in war maintained his sovereign say, while woman in her own domain held undisputed sway. No slogan sought as yet to make two opposites the same, or alter fundamental facts of function or of frame. I love to tell how answering once a shrill interrogation, a rarely honest candidate once summed the situation. Equal rights for equal sexes, is that clearly understood? Yes, madam, and I claim at once the right of motherhood. So this epicene excursion seemed at first a brainless fad, looked at askance and ridiculed by Tory and by Rad, a thing to make experience gasp and nature stare and wonder. For if God made men and women, who can now correct the blunder? They could and would, the hopeful cranks, who pioneered the movement, and on the providential plan proposed a quick improvement, relying on the moral funk that marked this flabby age when no one dared oppose a thing that claimed to be the rage. Effeminate man was always held a thing to scorn and hate, a mannish woman hitherto a sex degenerate. But now in conduct and costume they dragged her forth with glee, a pitiful burlesque of all she wasn't meant to be. With daily screech and daily scream, in friendly emulation, how most effectively to boom the latest press sensation. The poor deluded souls were cruelly pictured to the eye, perversely doing all the things they didn't ought to try. 'Twas woman this and woman that to drive you to distraction, and woman featured day by day in every pose and action. All grace and modesty tabooed, you had to look instead at woman kicking up her legs and standing on her head. You even saw her following the tame pursuits of yore, so long as woman in some form was always to the fore. Thus, woman horse wins oaks, announced one feminist with pride, another going one better had, smart wedding, woman bride. And every girl was taught at school to scorn her true vocation, and try to compass well or ill some manly occupation, though all within their secret souls harked primitively back, and true to nature every Jill still hankered for a Jack. But this result seemed destined that if Jill's to be a worker, Jack, as of old in tribal days, will tend to be a shirker. For every job a woman took, a man was on the dole, one idler more, one man the less to fill a husband's role. Though here and there the idle man, as might have been expected, despairing took to woman's work, which she herself neglected, till a kind of compensation through the crazy business ran, when the office girl was balanced by the house and parlour man. The woman's votes left women cold at first was widely that women's votes left women cold at first was widely known. What men might think about it, most were too polite to own, till in the public's heedless ears the thing began to hum, accepted gradually by all as something bound to come. The early martyrs of the cause seemed taking futile pains when they bit and scratched policemen and tied themselves with chains. But they reached the point where folly ends, persuasive force begins, when they chased the sacred persons of the very mandarins. This vixen violence may have stirred that sage but sharp reflection, which wobbling politicians need to vary their direction. Be that as may, in course of time they took the fateful turn, with a manifest advantage which they hastened to discern. Their hold upon the people's heart they feared was growing thin, but here they felt a hope of fresh successes still to win, like fishermen who cast their baits in unexploited waters, if they tried their taradiddles on the people's wives and daughters. So all combined or all vied, ere long the crazy work to crown, and in a frantic year or two turned nature upside down, scrapped all experience, and ignored man's whole recorded past, instinct and common sense still feebly struggling to the last, reconstituting what was once a sane and virile nation, once and for all upon a shortened petticoat foundation. Now, all who've seen historic parties part with their convictions and shed their fundamental creeds as inconvenient fictions may guess which one, with secret shame and angry shy grimaces, flaunted the flappers' franchise in their dazed opponents' faces. But when the prophet heard the news, he said, I cry you best. You've made democracy a farce, misgovernment a jest, and to legislative gamblers left one card alone unplayed, to pass the children's franchise and outvote the nursery maid. But can't you see, you something fools, you've carried things too far? No breed of men will stand for this, if haply men they are. Give guidance to the girls, why this the girls themselves will ban, and fretfully await the rule of sane regenerate man. And there were other stunts which he himself had never planned, in which his eager instruments were getting out of hand. These frantic pioneers, I find, are spoiling all my fun. In much they do, I find my work is half already done. But more than that, I seem to have a vague, uneasy notion that there's something worse than that in this accelerated motion. The world is going to hell too fast. The pace must really slack, lest made suspicious of its fate, it still might scuttle back. And the wiser way to treat mankind just now perhaps is this, to lead it blindfold on by gentle steps to the abyss. Well, so much for politicians, now you've clearly seen and heard 'em, involve themselves at last in this reductio ad absurdum. And listen while I tell you how the prophet sought to shatter life's holiest foundations in a much more serious matter. As a guiling theologian, he had now to make a name, since to preach a false religion was the cause for which he came. With a flabby-dabby deism to oust dogmatic piety, and a comfortable creed of the most tolerant variety. There is a God, but such a trump, he knows your limitations, and smiles indulgently on all your little aberrations. Of course he wants you to be good, but this is surely clear, that he who made you what you are will not be too severe. So as to doom and punishment, whate'er the bigots say, be sure that all will certainly come right upon the day. For if on earth you don't behave exactly as you ought, well, at the worst, you'll come before some mild celestial court, where a judge of lenient bias and of democratic bent would never dream of doing you without your own consent. Twixt good and evil now, it seems, there rests no further quarrel, damning you. And if there were, they mustn't fight, since war's declared immoral, but will form a coalition in that rising young psychocracy that's tending fast in heaven to replace the old autocracy. To scrap the old religion for good tidings such as these would prove a task as easy, so he hoped, as shelling peas, but was fretted from the first by a disturbing intuition that a troublesome impediment still barred their recognition. He soon, in fact, perceived, in spite of all that Bliffen said, that the creed he sought to supersede was not completely dead. Nor could he stifle this surmise, however he might try. What if, eternally derived, it lacks the power to die? The gods of old had faded out, so far as gods they were. But what if this intrusive faith had sources far elsewhere? Celestial power on earth that strayed, no earthly gear to gain. Immortal essence, mortal made, for sacrifice and pain. Chafed by vexatious thoughts like this, in black resentful mood, he passed some city church, whose door at noon wide open stood. Mid toil and moil of daily task, 'twere here that some were fain to shelter from the world, and some to shelter from the rain. But few went out without some thought far from life's fuss and fret, stirred softly by the gilded cross upon the altar set. Of two within the church that day, one started about at ease, and one upon the chancel step was sunk upon his knees. As Lucifer looked in, the sun looked out from wintry skies, and cast a pale but piercing beam that made him veil his eyes. It sought the dim and dusky fane through panes of ruby red, and straight upon the sacred sign a mystic radiance shed. No sound was heard, none spake a word, but intimately near, from infinitely far rang through a message, silver clear. To frame its sense in human speech, if I might humbly try, It seemed to echo back like this, man's agonizing cry. So long on earth as one of mine still kneels in faithful prayer, so long to answer and to aid, forever I am there. While but a spark of true belief shall pierce the gloom of doubt, the eternal fires shall flame again, nor ever flicker out. How much of this the prophet heard, how much he knew before, I can but guess, but saw him dart in anger from the door. Without the faithful, faith were naught, I'd better then begin, if I can't kill it from without, to sap it from within. I'll bolster up the modernists who've made the notion rife that Christianity must change to suit our modern life. Though fools have dared to say that this perversely is the need, that modern life should shape itself to match the Christian creed. I'll back those brainy clericals of prejudice bereft, who have whittled revelation down till nothing much is left. And passing every previous bond of sceptical admission, proclaim a creed so very broad it lacks all definition. By other schools within the church, each set to scorn the other, he hoped with rank discordant growths the sacred creed to smother. By fostering egoistic cant through ritual's slavish minions, he sought to make a travesty of high or low opinions. But while these schools and parties clashed, maneuvering for position, the church, invisible, lived on, inviting recognition. In man evangelized anew, he feared his only rival, still hoping for the best against a spiritual revival. Great Babylon, great Greece, great Rome, great powers and peoples all, their great days done, he knew had crashed or mouldered to their fall. For all alike the lesson learnt, unlearned by west or east, that which the fateful fingers drew at proud Belshazzar's feast. Weighed in the balance one and all, and in their hour of fate, found wanting in the things of might that once had made them great. With all their fleshly fabric sound, their mental force increased. The starved souls had wilted out, the inspiration ceased. The vision ends, and here ends too the sour satiric note, the stern and bitter jest from careless laughter most remote. 'Twas thus the dreamer strove to tell, in sad and sober sooth, may heaven hold it upon to scorn if aught it lacks of truth. And since to me at least it seems most menacingly clear, I merely say, God save us all, and leave the matter here. Thank you so much for listening. I won't add anything at this moment because it's long enough, but I feel that I will probably be doing another video where there will be a little bit of analysis of that epic piece of poetry. Thank you so much for being with me. Oh, I love you.